Sterling Holmes of Fansided and Stacking the Box, joined now by a man who has forgotten more about football than I'll ever know, Ed Werder. Ed, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you? Hey, thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking some football and some other projects that I've been involved with.
Yeah, let's start there with Rockin Protein, because Rockin Protein is kicking off the year two of its partnership with Folds of Honor, an organization dedicated to supporting the families of our nation's fallen and disabled service members and first responders through collegiate scholarships. Can you talk more about this fantastic partnership you have?
Yeah, I got involved with Folds of Honor for the first time last year when I did an event, a golf event for country music artist Lee Brice. And, you know, I'm a big country music fan, and I've become a huge advocate and believer in the cause of Folds of Honor and the support they provide, as you mentioned, to, you know, the families of fallen military service members and first responders through college scholarships. And so I was asked to, as part of kicking off this second year partnership, as Veterans Day approaches, I went to Phoenix and moderated what we call the Table of Honor. And there were 6 people who have been directly involved and benefited and had their lives impacted by association with Folds of Honor. And we sat down and we talked about their stories. And that content is fully available at rockinprotein.com/Folds of Honor. And hope you'll watch it. We spent a whole entire day there shooting this. It is a high production value commitment. And the people we spoke to were just so incredible. Allie McGraw and her mom, Allie, her father was a U.S. paratrooper whose parachute malfunctioned and he was badly injured and wound up in a hospital for a long period of time. And she became a music therapist. And she says he was my first patient. And so that was a remarkable story. And then another couple, Joy and Brody. Brody was a 20-year member of the Navy SEALs. And this guy could not have a more impressive resume in that he told us never before, stories he's never shared before. In terms of he's in a firefight with a handful of other Navy SEALs against hundreds of enemy soldiers and gets hit in the chest with a grenade and kicks it aside and it explodes and he's injured, has a lot of shrapnel in his leg even to this day. He never even went home. He never went home. He recuperated there, missed 12 missions, the only 12 missions he ever missed, much to his regret, and was a part of mostly Team SEAL Team 8, but part of SEAL Team 6 in the operation that eliminated Osama bin Laden. Bob and Miley Vogel. Bob flew 56 combat missions, and then in a training mission on the West Coast in bad weather at night, was on a training flight that went down in the ocean, and he was the only survivor. And he talks about how when the Coast Guard finally came and was rescuing him, they shined the light on the water around him. There were sharks everywhere, and he didn't know it at the time. So just amazing, amazing people. And I was talking earlier about the fact that, as somebody like you go to an NFL game every Sunday and there's a lot of pageantry and, the players are so, excited and self-promotional and, they have all these dances and routines they've choreographed to celebrate a touchdown or many times something less than that. And yet these people are truly heroic figures and they don't want to talk about what they went through and the risks they assumed and the suffering they endured for our country. So to be able to tell their stories I felt really important to me. And I became, as I am now, very emotional about it. Yeah. It was really genuinely an emotional experience. And as somebody who's interviewed, Super Bowl winning quarterbacks after they become the MVP, it was a more of an emotional experience for me to talk to these people.
I mean, it's what makes America so great. Without them, you would not have Sunday football. You would not be able to witness, again, what we like to think is America's pastime now was baseball. It's kind of moving to football. But without those heroes, we would not be able to enjoy all of that. No, that's Ed. That's incredible.
I know you also more now than ever, maybe, huh?
Yeah, and even I saw you tweeted out as well, Ed Werder NFL as well, right there on the X for all these great, incredible stories. I do want to tell
the link to the page is there. So if you can't remember, rockinprotein.com/folds of honor, just go to my Twitter or my Facebook page, and you'll find the links right there.
Perfect. I do want to talk a little Cowboys with you here. That radio story. I know you've been going at it with some folks on Twitter right now. Your Twitter account you have way more strength than I do. I saw you blocked your first person. I'm like, wow, good for you, Ed. You are stronger than I. But this whole Jerry Jones radio story is very fascinating. Can you walk us through this year?
Yeah. So the Cowboys are coming off their worst home loss in Jerry Jones's 35 years as the franchise owner. And he spoke. He's the only owner and general manager who speaks publicly multiple times a week on his own radio shows. And this is where the comments came from yesterday that have captured a lot of attention and create a lot of headlines and criticism. But he also does a big thing, usually right outside the locker room, right after game. So as a journalist covering the game, he's standing between you and a locker room full of players. And at the same time, he's making himself available down the hall 50 yards is Mike McCarthy doing his post-game press conference. And by far, Jerry gets the biggest audience because he has all the power in the organization. And so you want to talk to the person who controls the reaction, who creates the roster, hires and fires the coaches, and ultimately signs off on any personnel transactions. So yesterday, Jerry was in the kind of mood you might imagine. And he was asked pointed, aggressive questions that he's obviously not used to coming from that outlet. He views them as is clear if you look at what he said in his explanation. He clearly views them as a partner and sort of a safe space for Jerry under any circumstances. And so he clearly did not expect, nor did he appreciate the line of aggressive questioning about the mistakes he made in the offseason in putting this team together. And he expressed that. And the worst part for him was that he basically threatened the jobs of people who were doing their jobs. Now, I'm going to say this. As a journalist who's covered this team since Jerry came here in 1989, like, I've had far worse engagements with Jerry Jones than that. And they weren't on the phone. They were in person. Like, Jerry is screaming at me. Jerry is making physical contact with me. Jerry ultimately punishes me as a journalist. And he's threatened to take my credential before, but he knows there are limits. But so I see it maybe differently than other people do. Everybody else just wants to condemn Jerry. And I'm saying, hey, this is part of it. Like, if you're going to be a journalist, if you're going to be in this field, don't expect everybody to always be happy with your opinion or your line of questioning. And guess what? Sometimes they object directly. And sometimes when they're really bad, they overreact. Now, I can't tell you whether Jerry's going to do what he can to have these guys taken off his show, or he's going to publicly apologize to them the next time he's on with them, because those are both potential outcomes here.
He's like the people's owner. It's like, if, again, a little different here because we're not all billionaires, right? But if someone like myself were to become a billionaire, I find myself, it'd be hard to believe that I wouldn't be a owner or a GM like Jerry. He's so unique, and maybe not that aspect of it, but the control part, that is your child. A lot of these owners around the NFL, they care, but they are so far removed a lot of times from the day-to-day and what actually happens with the team. I almost think of Jerry as he's so unique, but the people's owner. I think a lot of random people in the NFL, if they were put in that situation, would probably handle an NFL team like Jerry.
Well, the problem here is that Jerry wants football credit. He's one of the few and really the only owner / general manager / president. And, people want him to, right now, they want him to admit his mistakes as the general manager. And I think Jerry would gladly admit to 3 decades of poor performance as the general manager if this is an important caveat, if you give him credit for the 3 Super Bowls they won when Jimmy Johnson and Barry Switzer were the coaches. Yeah. He would gladly trade 30 years of criticism if you would just acknowledge that he was the general manager who put those teams together. And so this is just an endless, lifelong quest on his behalf to justify that. That's what he wants. And he's not going to quit. He's not going to resign. It doesn't matter how bad it gets. The only people who are not going to be judged on their performance in the roles that they have within the organization are Jerry and his family members who populate the front office. One of the reasons Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys and took the financial risk that he did at the time, and it was a financial risk at the time, believe it or not, is he gets to be the general manager if he so chooses. And he gets to act in that capacity for as long as he wants to, regardless of how you or anyone else thinks he's doing the job. So scream all you want, Jerry's going to be the general manager till he dies, and all indications are he's going to outlive every one of us.
That's a good point. I'm 30 and I still think Jerry's got me. I'm 30 and Jerry's gonna be there and I'll be gone. I know we're up against it, but I do have one question in regard to the Cowboys and how they game to game, how they are, because this is perplexing to me. I'm here in Kansas City, so it's a little different. They're the anti-Chiefs in this way. The Chiefs always play close games. Every single game seemingly comes down to the final possession. The Cowboys are the opposite. It's either they blow a team out or they're getting blown out. Why is this? Is it because they're running play action when they're up 20? Is it because they get down by 2 scores and roll over? But from the outside looking in, I've always wondered about this.
Well, I think they had this enormous home field advantage. When the season started, they had won 16 consecutive home games in the regular season. But that has changed enormously. In fact, they've now lost all 3 of their home games by average margin of 22 points. Last year, they won all their home games. They're the only team in the NFL to be undefeated at home, and they won all their games by an average of 22 points a game at home. So there's some real symmetry here. Yeah. But it's flipped. The equation is flipped completely upside down. And I think if you look at what's wrong with this team, first of all, you have to acknowledge that they're missing 7 starters on defense, including Micah Parsons, Deron Bland, who set the NFL pick 6 record last year, DeMarcus Lawrence. Last week they played without them and their leading tackler, Eric Kendricks. So it's not surprising that they're having a hard time against top competition stopping people. But their whole equation has always been on being prolific on offense, getting a lead, forcing opponents to be one-dimensional, throw the football, and then attack the quarterback and force mistakes. That's what they did under Dan Quinn, who's now in Washington as the head coach. And they did it with such proficiency that during his 3 years, they led the NFL in takeaways. They led the NFL in points off turnovers. They led the NFL in defensive touchdowns. This year, none of that's happening. They're not getting sacks. They're not ahead. People are running the football at will against them, which is how they were beat last year. And then they can't respond offensively. They can't use the running game is worst in the league, and they can't use it to protect their defense by having longer drives. And because of the defensive problems we just talked about, they don't get short fields. They don't get defensive touchdowns. They don't get extra possessions. And so then they have the outcomes that they've had. And what is really upsetting to the fan base and alienated them from the start was when that streak of success ended last year at home in the first round against the Packers, and Jordan Love in his very first playoff game and the youngest team in the league beats the Cowboys badly at home. And then the offseason, Jerry really did nothing to make the roster better. They lost talent and They didn't replace it. They were the last team to sign a player in free agency. They basically ran it back with a lesser team and a coach in the last year of his contract and Mike McCarthy. And people are outraged that Jerry didn't see this coming. And now won't admit that it was that he's the one who caused it.
And here we are with the radio and everything. It's full circle, Ed. It's full circle right here. Ed Werder, NFL reporter, as well as Cowboys reporter. One more time, where can people check out both Table of Honor and the Never Settle stories?
Yeah, you can go see this great content that's been generated for Fields of Honor by Rockin Protein. And I was remiss to mention, I work with some like big time Hollywood filmmakers on this. Ashley Avis and her husband, Ed Winters, are tremendously accomplished and talented people. When I looked them up, who saw who I was working with, oh my God, I've never worked with a real director in my 30 years of television. So they did a tremendous job taking about 2 hours worth of interview material and condensing it down to a more manageable 5 or 6 minutes. And people can access that, as you said, on my Twitter account, at Ed Werder NFL, on my Facebook, or you can just go to rockinprotein.com/folds of honor, and you can see all the great content and learn more about these incredible people we're speaking of.
Ed, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on. Enjoyed talking football and our great military with you.